Hi everybody, it's Chef Christy, and I'm here in my quarantine kitchen still. It's the middle of May, and it's quite beautiful outside. And I've been thinking about making one of my favorite foods to have on hand as a snack or as a travel food. It's a great breakfast food. I don't have a clever name for them. I really feel like I need to have a clever name, but they're cornbread muffins, and they involve sausage and vegetables and fresh herbs, and they're really a little mini meal. When I am busy, I have a full day, and I know I'm not going to be able to get home to make a meal, and I don't want to eat at a fast food restaurant. I make these up, and a couple of these in a freezer block and a lunch bag, and I'm good for the day because they're very filling and they're tasty, and so I really like to have these around. I make them at Christmas time when Santa Claus and I are out making our rounds, and this gets us through one of those busy days. This and some other, olives and crackers and things like that, and we're good to go. So this is my basic recipe, and today I'm starting with a basic cornbread recipe. Although I am very often like to use a bag of Bob's Red Mill gluten-free cornbread mix. That works great with this. You could use other types of cornbread mix. I wouldn't use a Jiffy cornbread because it's very, very sweet. And a little sugar in your cornbread mix, if you wanted to use one, wouldn't hurt this. But if it was really cakey sweet, it would kind of clash with all the other savory flavors we've got going on. So we don't want that. So I'm not putting any sugar in mine today. And I am starting with 2 cups of cornmeal and a half a cup, it's 2 cups of flour altogether, a cup and a half of cornmeal, and that is 1/2 cup of a gluten-free flour mix. You could use regular flour in yours. And then I've got salt and baking powder, a teaspoon of each of those. I'll put the recipe up at the end of this. I'm going to add that to my dry ingredients. And I'm just going to mix all that together. Now, the regular recipe calls for buttermilk or milk, and here in my quarantine kitchen I just happen to have exactly the amount of buttermilk left over from a class that I was supposed to teach before we had the shutdown, and so I'm using a cup and a half of buttermilk. When I make this for Santa Claus, he doesn't do any dairy, so I make this with almond milk. It works great with dairy alternatives. It works wonderful with regular milk too, so you can totally use that. And I've got a 1/4 cup of just a vegetable oil. This is a sunflower and coconut oil combination, which should be really good. Now, let's talk about the meats. This is a pound of ground sausage meat that I have already browned off. This is chicken sausage, and what I really like to use is Delia's chicken sausage. Let me come in for an extreme close-up. There we go. Delia's chicken sausage. This is a local businesswoman in Atlanta. Used to own Flying Biscuit Cafe, and this was her chicken sausage recipe that she then broke out and started her own recipe. Now she's got Delia's chicken sausage stands all over town, and you can get her packaged products at Kroger and other grocery stores around town. And I really like that product. It's good. It's local. It's a businesswoman done good, so I love using that. And then I've got about 2 cups of chopped vegetables, and the vegetables are kind of up to you, but I use mainly root vegetables and not things that have a lot of moisture in them. So I wouldn't put mushrooms in this. I wouldn't put big chunks of onions in this, not tomatoes or peppers, things that would ooze a lot of moisture into the cornbread. So I've got some carrots, and because I had a stalk of celery that broke off, I used that. This is broccoli stems, because I bought a couple of big things of broccoli, and they had big honking stems on it, and I like broccoli stems, and this is a good use for that. Another vegetable that's similar to that in texture is kohlrabi, and in the summertime, especially if you have a CSA and you get kohlrabi in your box, and you're like, what am I going to do with that? This is really good use for that, because it really likes the kohlrabi turns into a kind of a sweet, dense vegetable that's got a lot of texture to it, but it bites really. It's got a nice tooth to it when you bite into it. So I think the broccoli stems chunked like that'll be good. An alternative to this is those bags of broccoli slaw that you see at the grocery store from time to time. I don't particularly care for those as a slaw, but they would work in this pretty well. And then I've got some green onions. These are drier than white onions or, big chunks. I wouldn't put a Vidalia onion in here just because I think it would make it very mushy. And then I've got mixed herbs, and that's truly a mixture. I had some dried up parsley leaves in the fridge. I had some thyme and sage. I threw a couple of pinches of oregano in there, some dill weed, a little bit of minced onion. I don't use garlic in this. I don't feel like the garlic complements this. I use garlic and pretty much everything else, but this is not one. So those are my ingredients, and I'll put the amounts up on the recipe at the end. But you've got your dry ingredients, your flours, your dairy or dairy equivalent, your oil. Oh, that last thing I forgot, 2 eggs. And the original cornbread recipes usually call for 1 egg. I'm adding a 2nd egg so that this holds together a little bit better, because I'm putting a lot of extra stuff in my cornbread, and I want it to hold it together in a nice little muffin so I can, use that as a portable meal. So I'm adding 1 extra egg to that. And I'm gonna go ahead and whip those up. Now, you can make this in a cast iron skillet. You can make it in corn cone cast iron skillet if you've got that. I like to make it in muffin pans because that's a really good serving size, especially, like I said, if I'm taking it for travel food. A couple of those in a little container and some freezer blocks, and I'm good in a lunch bag. So depends on what I'm planning on doing with it. It's fine in a loaf. You could put it in a loaf pan. Doesn't really matter what the format, but I like to use muffin pans for this. This is a silicone pan, so I don't really have to worry about oiling it. I have another little 6 tin over here that I have in reserve just in case I have more filling than will fill my regular one. This one I should go ahead and oil. So I will get, I just bought a bottle of spray ghee. Ooh, isn't that fancy? But that should work. And we'll hit this one too while we're at it. Why not? Can't hurt to have a little extra non-stickiness. Alright, so then I'm just going to mix up my mix. I've got all my dry ingredients here. I'm going to add my buttermilk. I was so thrilled when this recipe called for the buttermilk. I was like, oh, that's a really good use for that last half quart I've got in there. I had this to make the Irish soda bread that I made. The very first video that I made in my kitchen was the Irish soda bread. This is the last of that. And then I'm going to add my eggs. And those are farm fresh eggs from Wendell Farm. So they've got those beautiful golden egg yolks. Adds such beautiful color to any of your baked goods. You've got your backyard chickens, or if you have friends that have backyard chickens, I think you can really notice the difference between the quality of those eggs and something you might get at the grocery store. Alright, so I'm going to mix up my blend here. And then add all of my other ingredients. And I didn't pre-cook any of these vegetables. They're going to bake in the oven for a while. I did cut them pretty small, and I think that will cook them through pretty well. You can add whatever you like. Other types of root vegetables like parsnips would go really well in here. You don't want to use too many because it would kind of overpower the flavor, but those would really go well. I've used fennel root in this. Yellow squash, I think, would go pretty well, even though it's kind of a moist gourd. I've definitely grated yellow squash, zucchini, and carrot and used that as a combination in here. So this is a really, like I said earlier, this is a good one for later in the summer when you've got a bunch of miscellaneous vegetables in your CSA box and you're not sure what to do with all of them. This, make this great combination of vegetables. Look at that. There's hardly enough cornbread mix. This is why I add the 2nd egg. Hardly enough cornbread mix to hold all that goodness together. So you can see now that when I'm talking about it being a whole meal, it really is. You've got easily a 1/2 cup of cooked vegetables in a muffin. and probably maybe an ounce, half an ounce, probably close to an ounce of sausage, the way I have loaded it in here. And you don't have to use chicken sausage. You can use ground turkey or ground, you could use just straight up ground beef or pork sausage. I used venison to make a cottage pie the other night. That might be okay in this too. So whatever you have can go in this and be really happy. All right, so I'm going to give you a nice close-up of what that mix looks like. You can see all the herbs in there. I get my lighting right so you can see that. And it's pretty solid. It's got lots and lots of good stuff in there. So, now, I will make up my muffin cups. Now it does have some baking powder in there, so they'll puff a little bit, but they're not gonna puff way up. I can fill them pretty full. Oh, corn. Corn is good in this too. If you have like, I like to stock up on the organic canned corn when I find it in the Kroger's dollar sale. And a good can of corn is also nice. I like canned corn in my cornbread anyway because it gives a nice juicy crunch when you bite into it. Okay, so I can make. Okay, so I have my muffins all filled up now, and I'm going to put them in my oven, and I'm going to cook them at 375 degrees for 25-30 minutes. I'm going to check on them, make sure that they're not burning, which they shouldn't at 30 minutes. They shouldn't have even started that yet. But I just want to cook them until they're done in the middle, and that might take 35-40 minutes because they're so dense. So I'm going to check them at 30 and then we'll let them go until the insert test comes out clean, and we're going to check them once they've cooled off. Okay, our 30-minute timer has just gone off, so I'm going to look at, I'm looking in the wrong oven. I'm going to pull these out. I normally would do that. I generally keep them going, and I can tell they're not done because the tops aren't golden brown yet, but I wanted to do the test and talk about that because I think maybe people see that done and they're not really sure what they're looking for. So I have a little wooden skewer here. I could use a toothpick, and I'm going to put it in there. And you see me poking around, and I'm looking to see, and what generally, if this was a cake, for example, and I was doing this and the cake was undercooked, I'd be seeing moist crumbles of the batter still sticking to the little wooden skewer. Now I'm not seeing that here, but I still don't think these are cooked enough. I'm going to let them go ahead and go for another 10 minutes so that I can get some nice color on them. I can see some moisture bubbling up just from the vegetables, and that's what I want to be a little cautious of. I don't want to leave these mushy. Don't want to over dry them, but I don't want to leave them mushy. So they've been in for 30 minutes. I'm going to go for another 10, and we'll take them out at 40 minutes. Okay, it's been another 15 minutes, so we're going to go ahead and check our muffins. Oh, that looks great. They've just started to get a little bit of browning on top, and that's perfect. That's where I'm going to stop. And I'm going to go ahead and check them with my wooden skewer, and they come out clean. So I'm going to call those cooked. So I'm going to let them cool just for a minute, and then I'm going to pop them out and put them on a rack and let them cool completely, which is really important with all baked goods really, but especially with gluten-free goods. So I'm going to let these cool completely, and then we'll cut into one and see what they look like, and that'll be it for our muffins. Okay, I've got my muffins out on my cooling rack, and they probably should cool a little longer, but I'm really hungry, and I really want one of my muffins, so I'm going to go ahead and crack one open now. And so let me get this a little closer so that you can see this as I break it open. And we've got all that wonderful meat and veggies and herbs inside of there. I'm going to put a little pat of butter on that, since it's still warm and it can get a little gooey. So my veggie, corn, chicken, sausage muffins, I really need a better name for these. Can you help me out? Leave me a comment and let me know what you think I should call these. cornbread meal in the hand. No, none of that. That's not very good. So I hope you enjoyed this. Make these at home. Throw them in your freezer. Have them on hand. And use up all those great vegetables. Remember this recipe when you get into the summertime and you get those weird things that you don't know what to do with in your CSA box. This is a great way to use some of those up. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.